remember, George, I first met you at a play called the Brent Gosling play.
Yeah.
And it was a play I went to see, Moment of Grace it was called.
Right.
And it was a play about AIDS in the 80s. And it was a play that was about the father, the patient, and it was a dialogue. And you may not remember this, but I caught your eye in the audience. Not in that way, I hasten to. But I could, so I looked at you when somebody else was talking, and I could see you'd become very emotional about the play. But also for me, it felt really comforting because I thought you got what I was saying. You understood me when I was talking about those times, and it felt very comforting to me. And then, of course, you came to speak to me afterwards. And I guess have become friends since. I hope so too. And the first time I met you, you came to talk to me, and we spent talking for 3 hours.
3 hours. Wasn't it fun?
It was good fun, and it was very emotional. And I thought your story was both moving and fascinating. So I guess my first question was: this is something.
Can I just butt in?
You can, of course.
I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank and affirm the work this incredible man has done over so many years, not only for me, but for all the other people in the ether who were so helped by your brilliant, brave care.
Thank you.
When no one else was doing it. Lovely.
I wasn't going to cry till later, but
you were there. You were there. And not only that, you've continued with your team to create this incredible, cutting-edge, informative, educative healthcare centre to put it on the map. And I'm in awe of you, and so should everyone be for this man's wonderful work. I'm just seconding. I couldn't get the Fixodent in on my dentures today, so I might be a bit sibilant, and this isn't a real
Does any have any on them? No?
So if I start, always shoot out.
All right. End up over there. I guess when I spoke, I said you ought to, I wanted you to tell this story to other people, but you said it's time. I want to tell this story. Why now? This is the first time you publicly told your story, isn't it? What? I know this is difficult, first time you've ever done it. Why is it you wanted to do it?
Well, the way I decided to cope and survive was to kind of withdraw into my own world and create a little space where I could battle this dreadful disease. And so I became very wary of taking on new contacts, of making commitments, because I felt that commitments can sometimes bring up stress. And one of the first things I did when I got my diagnosis was say, it's a tsunami, everything's broken that I knew before, I've got to start all over again. In every part of my life, physically, financially, psychologically, I had to somehow start to make a new jigsaw of my life that was aimed at keeping me alive. And when they told me I was going to die, a little thing went in my head and said, no, you're not, George. Someone's got to get away. There will be one or two that will survive, and you're going to be it. There has to be someone that can sit and tell the story of my lost brothers and sisters. And that kind of became a very important part of how I decided that I wanted to live. Mm-hmm. And the rest of my life has really been cobbling together a sort of jigsaw of new pieces of coping strategies that have kept me alive and buoyant, not only through 40 years of HIV, but I've also had 3 consecutive cancers. I've had a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I had a squamous cell carcinoma of the anus, and 4 years ago I had bowel cancer. Mm-hmm. So I've also had to struggle my way through not 1, not 2, but 3 cancers, plus with HIV lurking in the background. I lost my partner, I lost my job. The losses were huge, so that's a bit of a ramble, but maybe we'll pick up on that.
We will pick up on that.
Yes, but
I want to go back before HIV and AIDS, and
right.
So can I just ask a little bit about your younger life? And of course, you know, when you was born and growing up, it was both illegal to be gay and it was a mental illness.
Yeah.
It was classified as a mental illness.
Yeah.
I know it's bizarre to think it in our lifetimes that was a reality, but it was. I just want to learn a little bit about your background and when you first realised you was gay, and what being gay was like then.
Right. Well,
for you, I mean, different people.
Well, I shimmied out of Angela on New Year's Day, 1949, so I'm 70. And I was sort of born into privilege, a sort of slightly tatty privilege, but both my Peter and Angela, and you notice I don't say parents, I use Peter and Angela, but Peter and Angela both came from families where moneyed. My mother's side was from wood that was brought in from the Caribbean, teak and all that, and my father's family had a haberdashery company, so they were quite well off. And I was then born in, it was in a farm, a beautiful farm with a countryside setting, but privilege doesn't necessarily always have pluses. It can have, like anything, a negative. And the negative for me on the privilege was that Peter and Angela were just vile. They were a mess, they were nasty. As individuals, they had the most terrible extremist views, and every phobia they could get their hands on they used. They publicly used words like pecky and wog and queer. It was just every day for them. And I realised as a young thing that these weren't the spirits that I wanted as role models, and these weren't the spirits that I wanted to try and build my life values around. They were alien to me, I felt it. But I was blessed because privilege gave me Nurse Kitty Savage, or Nanny Kitty Savage. Her name was Kitty Savage. So Peter and Angela had their rancid relationship fueled by gin. There were 3 in the marriage. Gordon's gin bottle was there, you know, and they had their raucous life inside the flat. And then Kitty built this beautiful little cocoon for me, a little world that was safe, and it was kind of magical. It was sort of all white towels and roaring fires and porridge with a lick of syrup under it, and then sort of malt drinks and everything was done for me. And Kitty was strict, but she realised I was, I think, different. I was effeminate from a very early age. I was quite demanding from a very early age, and she then realised that I had a passion for learning. So she kept introducing me to, in this little womb cocoon, things to learn from, books about nature, and then I'd go out into the countryside and just lie there and be at one with everything. It was just the most wonderful childhood in that way. I learnt about the songs of the Yellowhammer. I had a little old man that took me around who used to show me the birds and the names of the flowers, and I'd write and everything. And I just developed this passion very early on for learning, for the pure joy of taking in new stuff. It thrilled me as a child. And I think Kitty was preparing me for the horrors ahead of public school and the patriarchy and all that was going to entail. And she realised that one of the ways of maybe surviving in that bear pit was to be clever. It was it wasn't the sports boy, but there was also room for power in a power pit for someone who was clever. So I think Kitty prepared me for that. And I just had the most magic first 8 years. I just wander and let my imagination, I'd make up stories. So that was a good side, a plus of the privilege. But of course, always lurking in the background were these dreadful Peter and Angela, who were just such mean-spirited, bigoted.
How did that feel when you heard words like queer? Did they
it felt uncomfortable even at 4 or 5, you know. And when Nanny left, Kitty left at 9, and I was left exposed to them, I knew it was wrong. And they tried to inculcate it into me, you know, which was the awful thing about it. But I, like Philip Longer, they fucked up. I then decided that this was mean-spirited, I wasn't mean-spirited. This was hurtful, I wasn't hurtful. So I think I then said, I need to make a life where I find things that eradicate and replace that layering that I've had from these dreadful people, and make my own sense of what I see as fair and justice.
Essentially, your nanny had a huge influence.
So Nanny Kitty, bless her, yeah. Kitty's
an antidote to it.
An antidote. So, but she was hard with me, but I like that. I think I needed self-discipline, and I needed it for public school. You need to be.
So when did you find out and acknowledge you were gay?
In the barn on the farm. It's a song, isn't it? In the barn on the farm. I was about 9 or 8, and the cowman's daughter called came in, and she sort of came in, and she was very plump and voluptuous, was Mary, and she pulled her knickers down and said to me, "Oh, look at that," and I couldn't really see what it was really, but I said, and then she said, "Show me yours." And I sort of went very Kenneth Williams and said, "Certainly not." And poor old Mary, I can still see her waddling off, pulling up her knickers like a penguin out of the barn. And I realised that I should have been more receptive to Mary's advances.
Right, okay.
But realised that wasn't really what I wanted in the barn, really. So I think that's when I first realised. But I kind of realised because I was sort of effeminate and sort of geeky that I was different. I'm proud to be different in a very early age.
Okay. And what was it like being gay at that time? When you got older and you said,
when I got older?
You know, just with the background of it being illegal, that it was still...
Well, I think I was at the tail end of that.
Okay.
By the time I came out, clubs had started opening.
Okay.
So I didn't have to experience the horrors of, prison and all that sort of less of that. But
what were the clubs like at the time? What was the gay scene like before?
Well, can I just take you back to when I first had my gay relationship, because it went on from there. It didn't end. So
have I jumped?
Because I then went to a public school, and it really is a bear pit. It's harsh. But a bit like Peter and Angela, there was a wonderful side to it, because I'd worked my way up the pole and power played my way up through my brightness and getting lots of exams, and I also had a beautiful choir voice and sang, which made me head chorister, which was another power position that you could have in the hierarchy, that you needed to have something, be a sportsman. There were these certain positions that gave you fair immunity from the bullying and all that. So anyway, I was given a little room in the house that we lived in, and it was a study for 2 people, and it was empty. And then one day there was a knock on the door. I was about 16, and this heavenly Australian boy came in called Dan. Good day, and he was bronzed and freckled, the complete opposite of me, and he was then to share this room with me. And after about 6 months, we used to sort of play, fight and wrestle, and realised that we were sexually attracted to each other, and started having sex, and we sort of fell in love in this incredible environment. We could have 2 years of not only a physical relationship, but learning the joys and horrors of a relationship, and we had it in the sort of safety of this cocoon. So it was very intense, and it was a wonderful sort of introduction to, before I go into my clubbing life, I had this wonderful relationship with Dan for 3 years, really. So yes.